All right, this is Jason Fitzgerald from Strength Running, and let's do this. Since the last presentation I did got such a great response, I decided to put together another one for you. But seriously, before I start, I just want to say thank you for all of your tweets and emails and other messages about this prevention material I've been putting together. It helps me a lot with focusing on the topics that you actually care about and are dealing with right now in your running. When I get all this feedback, like here you'll see Sarah, whose success I profiled on the blog, it motivates me to continue putting together all this free material to help you run injury-free. And here you'll see a few tweets from runners who really are enjoying all this prevention stuff. Like I shared in my article about how I personally went from chronically injured to healthy and consistent. I truly believe that injury prevention is the bridge to running to your potential and, truly enjoying it. So thanks again. It means a lot to me. Okay, let's get started with this Q&A. We're going to cover the benefits of icing and anti-inflammatories, strength exercises, what actually causes injuries, and two more aspects of injury prevention. All right, our first question is, does icing and NSAIDs help prevent running injuries? All right, first, let's tackle ice. There's actually conflicting evidence that icing actually works to reduce muscle soreness, but most runners believe it does. In fact, some of its efficacy might be the placebo effect, but regardless, I'm a firm believer in its ability to reduce inflammation and delayed onset muscle soreness. One way that ice can help treat an injury is that it helps clear the injured area of waste products and it speeds the recovery process. But there is a downside to icing. Icing too often will reduce your body's ability to fight inflammation naturally. After all, a little bit of soreness is a good thing. It activates the adaptation process and forces us to get stronger, faster, and more resilient. The reasons why we train in the first place. So you need to use ice strategically, only when you need to. If you think you pushed too hard during a speed workout or your long run was a little too long, then take an ice bath or ice whatever happens to be bothering you. When you're nursing an injury, you should ice aggressively. All right, next there's NSAIDs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which are most commonly known as Advil or Tylenol. Now, there's a reason why these drugs are so popular. They do, in fact, work. They're definitely an effective drug at reducing pain and inflammation. But just like overusing ice, you can overuse anti-inflammatories. Sure, they'll reduce the feeling of soreness you experience after a race or a tough workout, but they won't actually help repair any of your muscle tissue. Some studies even suggest that these drugs can inhibit the adaptation process, slowing down recovery. So, while they can be really useful in some situations, they're not designed for persistent soreness or for preventing pain before it occurs. So you shouldn't become a chronic user of Advil or Tylenol. In the grand scheme of running, ice and anti-inflammatory drugs aren't your first or even second or third line of defense. Instead, it's much more productive to focus on how your training is structured and also your own personal particular weaknesses. Okay, let's jump to question number 2. Will certain functional strength exercises help prevent running injuries? My response to this question is going to be vague. The answer is yes and no. Let me show you a recent tweet by Jay Johnson, a coach I really admire. He said, "I can't stand it when people want to know what 5 exercises to do to get stronger. They should think in terms of progressions and routines." Now there's a lot of wisdom in that 140-character tweet. What Jay is saying is that the exercise itself is not what's truly important. It's how it's structured with other exercises in your entire training program and how you progress through several difficulty levels of that exercise. So my answer is yes and no. Yes, there are particular exercises that are helpful for runners. And yes, there are particular exercises that are especially useful for specific injuries. But the more important and valuable information is how to set up a routine of exercises that includes a progression. Let's use one quick example. Many of you are familiar with the ITB rehab routine that I developed while I had my last injury in 2009. I created this routine after seeing 4 physical therapists and doing more research on IT band syndrome than I care to remember. But remember, the ITB rehab routine isn't the entire story of me finally getting healthy. The strength exercises are just one aspect of injury prevention and how I got healthy. The training adjustments I made are also just as important. The other strength work besides the ITB rehab routine are just as important. So remember that no one thing is a panacea that will help you stay injury-free. I actually changed the wording of this question from the original to include the word help. Whatever you implement in your running to stay healthy, it will only be one aspect of a complete injury prevention program. Otherwise, that's like saying, I ate blueberries today, so I must have eaten healthy. Blueberries can be one part of a healthy diet, but they're not the whole solution. All right, I think that was the best analogy that I've ever come up with, so on that note, let's dive into the next question here. What are the benefits of stretching before and after running? What stretches help prepare you to run, and what help you recover after running? Oh, this is a good question. There are a few things in life that I am passionately against, and static stretching is one of them. Look, static stretching is virtually worthless for runners. The research that's been published on this topic in the last 10 to 20 years is breathtaking. Let's look at some conclusions from these studies, all right? So number 1, if you stretch before running, you're going to reduce your strength and speed for about an hour. Now remember, your legs are essentially springs when you go for a run, and when they're flexible, they're not as efficient. And because of that reduction in efficiency, you're going to perform worse. All right, number 2, you will increase your range of motion if you stretch before running. That's true. But ask yourself, is that really what you want? Consider that most injuries happen within your normal range of motion. So why would you want to increase your flexibility? And finally, I'm not aware of any study that shows static stretching reduces runners' injury rates. Plus, stretching after you run doesn't reduce soreness the next day. So my short answer is that static stretching before running can actually be quite harmful. And doing it after running, preferably targeting only those muscles that actually feel tight to you, is the only appropriate time for a little bit of static stretching. You know, the research doesn't show that post-run stretching is going to help you in any way. Instead, I recommend that every runner spend 5 to 10 minutes with a dynamic flexibility routine before they run. These exercises actually help prepare you for running by doing what a warm-up is supposed to do, raise your body temperature. But the benefit of a dynamic warm-up is that it doesn't have any of the harmful effects of static stretching, like reducing your strength or speed or power. So if you're not sure where to start, my recommendation is to go to Strength Running and search for the standard warm-up. It's a great warm-up routine that a lot of runners really like. All right, let's tackle a tricky question here. What is actually causing my injury? So I'm getting a lot of tough questions, and this is probably the toughest. Now, the answer to this one could be a book, and there are books out there dedicated solely to the subject of injury diagnosis. But look, the truth is that every runner is unique. We all have different gait styles, running forms, weaknesses, strengths. We each make our own training mistakes, and most of us fall prey to doing too much, too soon, too fast at some point in our running. So it's impossible for me to say definitively what's causing any one particular injury, because it could be one of up to 10 or more different training factors. Though the most common injuries do have some common culprits. So ITBS is often caused by weak hips. Achilles tendinopathy is often caused by poor foot stability or a chronically tight Achilles tendon. Plantar fasciitis is usually caused by weak foot musculature, and that's from either not working out the muscles in your foot or by wearing extremely supportive, poorly designed shoes, both while you're running and also during your day-to-day casual life. So addressing these issues can go a long way to resolving your injury. But if you don't address the training structure that complements these weaknesses, you might get injured again. So that's another really important thing to think about. Okay, let's move to our next and final question of this series. It's a long one. I started hill sprints, minimalist running, and strength exercises to stay healthy, but my plantar fasciitis flared up again. How do I incorporate injury prevention techniques without triggering an injury? Wow, how ironic is this? Injured by the very preventative measures that were used to stay healthy in the first place. First, I think all of these injury prevention techniques are great and they can be used very effectively to stay healthy. In fact, right now in my own training, I'm using all three and I'm running more than I did when I was training for a marathon. So, the problem here is likely a too much too soon issue. This runner started some minimalist or barefoot running at the same time they started hill sprints and strength exercises. Remember that every element of your running program is a stress. Healthy, injury-free training is being able to manage those stresses. If they're designed to keep you healthy, they can injure you if you're too aggressive with them. So, what's more important than any one prevention technique is how they're built into the training plan. Do they complement your running? Are they progressive? Are you ready for them? Do they fit your strengths and weaknesses? Hill sprints, for example, are fairly advanced. I wouldn't recommend those for beginners. They have to be executed properly or else they're very risky. You are sprinting as fast as you possibly can up a very steep hill, after all. And when it comes to minimalist running, I call myself a cautious minimalist. I think it's very helpful and it provides a host of benefits, but I also recognize that it's a pretty big injury risk, so just like Elmer's glue, a dab will do you. Some runners start with a few minutes of barefoot running, and within a few weeks they're trying to run a few miles without shoes. Now, to give you an idea of just how gradually you need to build your time running barefoot, I've been wearing minimalist shoes, racing flats, and spikes for 15 years. And when I run barefoot, I limit myself to about 4 to 5 minutes total once per week. That's it. And that's all you need for injury prevention. So when you can use a little bit of each preventative technique in a smart training program, then you're really going to see results. Okay, that's the last question, and that wraps this week's injury prevention Q&A presentation. Thank you for tuning in. The hundreds of emails, tweets, Facebook comments, and even more messages have really been impressive over the last couple weeks. And I can tell that this subject is really important to you. So I'm putting together something special for you that I think is going to be really helpful for those with consistent injuries. I'm going to have some more information on that soon. So until then, if you're not already on my injury prevention email list, stay updated at strengthrunning.com/injury prevention. Thanks again.